Good evening. It is Thursday, June 22nd. My writing. Second video in the vlog series. This one about a living universe. The fiction, what I create, how it all intertwines. How when I'm game mastering for the virtual tabletop sessions on Roll20, how that feeds collaborative storytelling and how that forces me to improvise, and it's all motivation. That's a muse. It's a circle. It all works well together to keep me creating when I would otherwise surrender to mediocrity, and my ego would be sad. I need to feed it. I would like to do something grand and great, and that ego, that fantasy, I keep it alive in my head. The living universe exists as a kind of reoccurring dream that I can feed and I can share. And I think of it in present tense, which is part of why I write in third person present tense rather than past tense. It's part of why I tend to prefer video interpretations of intellectual properties as opposed to reading the novels that often inspire these videos. I'll avoid the Harry Potter books and watch the movies instead. I'll skip the new, if George R.R. Martin ever writes more Game of Thrones books, Ice and Fire series, I will probably avoid them and just stick with the show. Controversial though the last season has been, it is a living thing when I see it, and too often when I'm reading, it's kind of a dead thing, past tense. Now, perhaps when I was younger, it was satisfactory, but now I require something I can exist within, that I can be immersed and visualize around me. So that's how I write. That's how I try to create. I actually exist in that moment. And being a game master, being a dungeon master for a group of dedicated players going on a few years now, is just builds upon this skill of creating in the present tense. I recommend all creators of fiction to do the same, to have a group of people that you facilitate. And I like the sandbox. I think that's necessary for life, for a living fiction. The sandbox allowing players, allowing the participants, the fellow storytellers that you are leading, to mess with your world, to mess with your toys, and not force them down lines that are pre-established. It can be a scary thing if you really wanted a certain outcome, if you build characters and then they get smashed. I insulate my novels from where the players are and when the players are a bit, to mitigate these dangers. And then I mine what they do for, as they are muses. They inspire, they motivate and inspire. The obligations I have to them is a motivation. And for example, at this last session, there was a treasure chest that they opened, and they found 20,000 copper pieces, but there were peculiar things about these copper pieces. And they found now this is a fantasy setting, but they found something like a clockwork man and a slot that these copper pieces might fit into, like a coin slot. And I won't give it away how much I had prepared before, but certainly in the moment I had some inspiration for improvisation, and it was truly a collaborative storytelling experience. And to the credit of what I've created, it's very easy to do this. A living universe with a healthy sandbox makes it easy to improvise. Another player asked some very deep philosophical questions about what souls are. And I was able to, on the spot, say, a soul is the mind of a sentient being. All such beings have one. Animals do not. They're shaped by internal and external forces. They form within spiritual energy, which can be gathered by a number of means. Souls can go wherever the spiritual energy they are nested within goes. A typical person's soul will be colored by their experience in life, and this will be reflected in their aura. And then I went into some deeper thoughts. Though colloquially spirit and soul are synonymous, those in the know understand that spirit best refers to energy with intent, and a soul is sentience nested within spiritual energy. So fire can have spirit, which can be formed into an elemental servant of sorts. But if this elemental forms sentience, it earns the additional label of devil. Souls are gateways to potential. They are stars in the spiritual landscape. Creatures like dogs and cats have something like gas giants in this analogy, or maybe some kind of dim dwarf star, but generally they are not sought after for their light. Spirits have an aura. Spirits with a soul have an aura with 5 hues representing alignment, type, power, sanity, and connectivity. All 5 are required for sentience. Each hue has a distinctive pattern, style, and visually blends the 5 symbolic colors: blue, black, red, green, white. This can be read like a snapshot of a soul. So that's overwhelming, I know, but it just flowed out because I have a well-defined structure, and the sandbox is inside. The sand fills the structure. So the structure doesn't define the story. It allows any story to be told within the constraints of a universe with different laws. But those laws exist. They're still firm. So, in other words, like there is hard science fiction, there is hard fantasy, and the fantasy that I write is a hard fantasy in that same way that there is hard science fiction. So there, for example, a character in typical fantasy, they might succeed, they might be able to gain power because of an emotional reason. But in hard science fiction, if a character is emotional, they're still ruled by the laws of the universe. They can't break those laws just because they're emotional. They can't connect to some greater power that will just come into being, and it'll just make the story go a certain way. And the same is true with hard fantasy. There's kind of a different set of physics. Hard fantasy is perhaps more akin to science fiction. And my fantasy is actually nested in science fiction, as it takes place within a virtual reality setting of on a generation spaceship. Oh, surprise! Yeah, it's not a big spoiler to say this, as my first book, Destiny's Hand, spells this out. But the story goes so deep in that it's not a huge reveal. Anyway, you are focused. I'm losing my threads. My tapestry's fraying. I think I've touched on everything I want to say for Living Universe. So I will sign off, and next week I will be in Japan, but I'll try to record and upload articles. So that's, while my fiction is all connected in one living universe, one tapestry, the articles are nonfiction and relate to my life and my family and maybe what's going on. I try to keep it on, if it's not a family life thing, I try to keep it to something I have a special connection to. Like I did an article on a book that got censored that I familiarized myself with. But yeah, I will in Japan try to do justice to a video about articles. I will see you then. Bye.